Welcome back. You are listening to the home of forbidden romances. Prepare yourself, because tonight's story will leave you breathless. The champagne flute shattered in Kalen's hand, the crystal turning to dust under his grip, but the sound was swallowed by the polite applause of the gala. He didn't notice the blood mingling with the expensive vintage dripping down his palm. All he could register, with a terrifying primal clarity that drowned out the string quartet and the chatter of the city's elite, was the scent. It hit him like a physical blow to the sternum. A maddening, intoxicating aroma of crushed winter berries, ozone, and sweet, agonizing distress. It was the scent of a soulmate, a biological imperative that could bring empires to their knees. And it was coming from the slender, pale man currently slipping an engagement ring onto his sister's finger. Kalen Valerius, patriarch of the Valerius conglomerate and the most feared alpha in the austere city of Oakhaven, felt a growl vibrating in his chest that threatened to tear his tuxedo apart. Kalen? Oh my God, your hand! The voice of his sister, Lyra, broke the trance. She rushed toward him, her satin gown rustling, dragging her fiancé with her. I'm fine, Kalen rasped, his voice dropping an octave, thick with a command he barely suppressed. He kept his eyes locked on the man. Julian. That was his name. The struggling artist Lyra had picked up 6 months ago. The beta who was sweet, unassuming, and safe. But as Julian stepped closer, his eyes wide, terrified pools of emerald green met Kalen's. The scent spiked, sharp and undeniable. The suppressants Julian must have been swallowing by the handful were failing. To everyone else in the room, Julian was a bland, scentless beta. But Kalen was a prime alpha. He could smell the lie. He could smell the fear. And beneath the fear, he could smell the omega in heat. "Let me help you, sir," Julian stammered, reaching for a napkin, his hand trembling. As Julian's fingers brushed Kalen's bleeding palm, a shockwave of pure electricity arced between them. Kalen's vision tunneled. Every instinct screamed at him to grab the man by the throat, drag him to the nearest private room, and bite into the scent gland hidden beneath that high collar until the world burned down. "Don't touch me," Kalen snarled, jerking his hand back. The room went silent. Lyra looked stricken. "Brother." Kalen narrowed his eyes, the golden flecks in his irises burning. He looked at the man who was destined by every law of nature to be his, yet was pledged to the one person Kalen had sworn to protect. "Go to my study, Julian," Kalen ordered, the authority in his voice making the Omega flinch visibly. "We need to discuss your intentions." The Valerius estate was a fortress of mahogany and old money, a place where secrets were buried deep within the wainscoting. The study was the heart of that fortress, smelling of leather, ink, and now, the overwhelming pheromones of a distressed Omega. Julian stood by the fireplace, hugging himself as if trying to hold his shattering composure together. Kalen locked the heavy oak door and turned, the click of the lock echoing like a gunshot. "How long have you been lying to her?" Kalen asked, his voice deceptively calm as he stalked across the Persian rug. "I don't know what you mean," Julian whispered, though he backed away until his legs hit the velvet armchair. "Don't insult my intelligence," Kalen hissed, closing the distance. He stopped inches from Julian, towering over him. "I can smell you, little liar. I can smell the blockers decaying in your blood. You're an Omega." Julian's breath hitched. "Please. I have a prescription. It's managed. I'm effectively a beta." "Effectively?" Kalen laughed, a harsh, humorless sound. He slammed his hand against the mantel next to Julian's head, trapping him. "There is nothing effective about what is happening between us right now. Do you feel it? That pull in your gut? The way your skin burns where the air touches it?" Julian squeezed his eyes shut, a tear leaking out. "It doesn't matter. I love Lyra." "You love her money?" Kalen accused, leaning down, inhaling the scent of winter berries at the juncture of Julian's neck. It was intoxicating. It was torture. "No!" Julian's eyes snapped open, flashing with a sudden, desperate defiance. "I love her kindness. I love that she doesn't look at me like a piece of meat or a broodmare. In my family, omegas are currency. My father sold my brothers to the highest bidders. I ran away. I hid. Being a beta was the only way to be free. Kalen paused. The raw honesty in Julian's voice cut through the haze of alpha aggression. This wasn't a con artist. This was a refugee. So you're using my sister as a shield, Kalen said, his voice lower, less angry but no less intense. She offered me safety. She thinks I'm a beta who just needs a start. We have an arrangement. A companionship. Julian confessed, his voice trembling. I never touched her. I wouldn't. I couldn't. Kalen's heart hammered against his ribs. He never touched her. The relief that washed over him was staggering, followed immediately by a surge of possessiveness so dark it frightened him. You can't marry her, Julian. I have to. The wedding is in 2 days. If I cancel, my father's collectors will find me. I have debts I incurred running away. Lyra paid them off. I owe her my life. I will pay them, Kalen said instantly. I will buy your debt. I will buy you if I have to. Julian's face crumpled. A mix of insult and despair. That is exactly why I ran. I don't want to be owned, Kalen. Not even by a prime. Especially not by you. Why not me? Kalen demanded, grabbing Julian's chin, forcing him to look up. Because, Julian breathed, his pupils blown wide, the heat beginning to glaze his eyes. Because looking at you makes me want to submit. And I promised myself I would never kneel for anyone again. The admission hung in the air, heavy and charged. Kalen realized with a jolt that Julian felt the bond just as intensely. He was fighting his biology with every ounce of his will. I won't let you marry her, Kalen swore softly. I won't let you live a lie. And I certainly won't let you spend your nights in a bed that isn't mine. Then what will you do? Julian challenged, though his knees were buckling. Tell her? Break her heart? Tell her that her brother wants to steal her fiancé. I'll do whatever is necessary. The next 24 hours were a blur of agony. Kalen worked from his office, systematically dismantling the financial debts of one Julian Vesper. It was a complicated web of loan sharks and underworld syndicates, but Kalen Valerius was a predator who knew how to eat smaller fish. He didn't sleep. He couldn't. The phantom scent of Julian lingered on his clothes. Meanwhile, the preparations for the wedding continued. Kalen watched from the shadows as Julian moved through the rehearsal dinner, pale and sweating. The suppressants were toxic at this dosage. The Omega was poisoning himself to keep the secret. It was during the toast that it happened. Lyra was raising her glass, smiling radiantly. To Julian, the man who showed me that love is quiet and kind. Julian stood up to accept the toast, but his legs gave way. He collapsed, crashing into the table, sending silverware and china clattering to the floor. Julian! Lyra screamed. The crowd gasped. But Kalen was already moving. He vaulted over the table, landing beside the fallen man. The scent was no longer a hint. It was an explosion. The stress had triggered a full-blown biological reaction. Julian's body was burning up, his system purging the blockers in a violent, pheromone-laden wave. A murmur went through the crowd. The alphas in the room flared their nostrils, confused, aggressive. Get back! Kalen roared, his voice booming with prime authority. The guests stumbled back, cowed by the sheer force of his dominance. He scooped Julian into his arms. The Omega was delirious, clawing at Kalen's shirt. It hurts. Kalen, please. I've got you, Kalen whispered, ignoring Lyra's confused tears. I've got you. He carried Julian out of the ballroom, not toward the hospital, but toward the master wing of the estate. He kicked the door to his bedroom open and laid Julian on the silk sheets. Julian was writhing, gasping for air. His skin flushed a deep, feverish pink. The pills, Julian moaned. I need. No more pills, Kalen said, stripping off his jacket and throwing it aside. He climbed onto the bed, straddling Julian's hips, pinning his wrists to the mattress to stop him from hurting himself. You're going into heat, Julian. Fighting it now will kill you. I can't. Lyra. Lyra is safe. You are not marrying Lyra. I have nothing. Julian sobbed, his body arching up, seeking the friction, seeking the alpha. You have me? Kalen growled, lowering his chest until he was pressing Julian into the mattress. You are my mate. You were mine from the moment you walked into that room. Admit it. Julian stared up at him, sweat matting his dark hair to his forehead. The resistance was crumbling. The biological need to be claimed, to be safe, to be held by his fated partner was overwhelming the logic of his fear. Kalen? Julian whimpered, tilting his head back, exposing the pale, unblemished line of his throat. It hurts so much. I know. Kalen brushed his lips against the pulse point, inhaling deeply. I can stop the pain. But once I do, there is no going back. You will be bonded to me. Everyone will know. I don't care, Julian cried out, his hips snapping up. Please, claim me. Kalen didn't need to be told twice. He sank his teeth into the gland at the base of Julian's neck. Julian screamed, not in pain, but in a release of tension so profound it felt like dying and being reborn. Kalen's venom flooded his system, rewriting his biology, binding their souls together with a knot that could never be untied. The scent of winter berries sweetened, mixing perfectly with Kalen's dark wood and musk. For hours, the storm raged. It was a claiming of violence and tenderness, a release of months of repressed longing and years of loneliness. When the dawn broke, the room was quiet. Julian lay asleep, his head resting on Kalen's chest. The bite mark on his neck was red and angry, but already healing. He looked peaceful for the first time since Kalen had met him. The door handle turned. Kalen shifted, pulling the sheet up to cover Julian's bare shoulder, his eyes snapping to the door with a protective glare. It was Lyra. She stood in the doorway, still wearing her rehearsal dinner dress, looking exhausted. She looked at the clothes strewn on the floor. She looked at the bite mark on Julian's neck. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She walked into the room and sat on the edge of the chaise lounge, staring at them. He's an Omega, she stated flatly. Yes, Kalen said, his hand tightening on Julian's arm. And you're his fated. Yes. Lyra let out a long, shaky breath. She looked at Julian's sleeping face. He never kissed me properly, you know? Not once. I thought he was just shy or respectful. She looked up at Kalen, her eyes swimming with tears. Did he love me at all? He loves you, Kalen said firmly. He was trying to survive. He was terrified of being enslaved again. He thought you were his only safe harbor. So he used me. He trusted you, Kalen corrected. There is a difference. And he was willing to die, literally poison himself to death, rather than betray that trust and expose himself to me. Lyra looked at her brother, really looked at him. She saw the way his hand curved protectively around Julian, the lack of the cold tension that usually defined him. I haven't seen you look this alive in 10 years, Kalen. I'm sorry, Lyra. I tried to stop it. She stood up, smoothing her dress. Don't insult me. You're a prime. You can't stop gravity. She walked to the door, pausing with her hand on the frame. The wedding is cancelled. I'll tell the press it was mutual. Incompatibility. But Kalen, yes. If you ever treat him like property, if you ever make him feel like he has to run again, I will destroy you. I don't need to be an alpha to take down this company. Kalen smiled, a genuine, sharp smile. Understood. When the door clicked shut, Julian stirred. He blinked open his emerald eyes, panic flaring for a second before he felt the bond, the solid warmth of the alpha beneath him. He looked at the door, then up at Kalen. She knows, Julian whispered. She knows, Kalen said, kissing the top of his head. And she forgives. The debt is gone, Julian. The lies are done. You don't have to be a beta. You don't have to be a husband to a woman you don't desire. Julian rested his cheek against Kalen's chest, listening to the steady, powerful thrum of his heart. Then what am I? Kalen lifted Julian's chin, looking into the eyes that would now haunt him for the rest of his life. You are the master of this house, Kalen said softly, and the only person on this earth who can bring me to my knees. And that is how the Alpha King fell for the crown of thorns. If you enjoyed seeing the mighty Kalen completely undone by his instincts, destroy that like button. And tell me in the comments, is it betrayal if biology gave them no choice? I'll be reading your answers. Subscribe for the next chapter. Until then,